Buenos días, clase. Hoy vamos a hablar de unos verbos que son un poquito irregulares. Se llaman verbos que cambian de raíz. Stem changing verb, raíz. So, if you remember our verbs, let's say, for example, the verb hablar. It has two parts of it. It has a root or a stem. So that is our root or stem. And in Spanish, the word for that is raíz. And then it has an ending, this part right here. So normally when we conjugate a verb, we take our root, hablar, so hable, and then we add the endings for the subject. So if we were to say yo, we would add the hablo for the ending. All right. So today we're going to talk about verbs that have some irregularities, but they're patterns in this part, in the root. Okay? So instead of just copying out word for word with hable, we're going to have to change some vowel portions to it. The first set of words that we're going to be looking at today are listed on the screen. So you have the word cerrar, which means to close. We've used that a little bit with the ventanas. Empezar, which means to begin. Entender, to understand. Pensar, which means to think. But you also kind of say, I'm thinking about going to the store. So it's kind of like planning. I'm planning to go to the store. So you can almost make a future out of it. Preferir is going to be a really great verb for you to prefer. And querer is going to be one that's very useful also to want. If you'll notice, all of these verbs have, after it on the vocab list, they have a little ie in parentheses. And that is because these verbs are stem-changing verbs. And in the stem, the main vowel in the stem changes from an e to an ie when you conjugate it. So remember, if we look at these verbs, our stem is right before the ending there. So we have ser, empez, entend, pense, prefer, and querer. And for these verbs, you need to memorize when you see them that when you're conjugating them, instead of using the e for the most part, you're going to need to use an ie. So let's take a look at the verb cerrar and how it's conjugated. So here we have our root, and here we have our ending. So let's go ahead and get started. So normally we would have this verb conjugated like this, ser, and then the ar, our ending for the eo form, is o. But because it's a stem-changing verb, instead of the e, we are here going to put an ie. So ie here in all of our stems, almost all of them, we are going to use ie instead of the e. So ie instead of that e. However, for some odd reason, the nosotros form does not take the stem change. So the nosotros form is going to really mirror our stem from before. So we have ser and we have ser. There's no change in the nosotros form. Then we're going to go back. It's an AR verb, so we're going to add our endings. So we have o for the yo, as for tú, a for usted, a for él and for ella, amos for nosotros and nosotras, an for ustedes, and an for ellos and for ellas. So if you remember earlier, I drew that and asked you about the picture of a boot. So let's look at why we have the boot. Some people call these stem-changing boot verbs. And that's because if you draw around the verbs that stem change, as opposed to not the nosotros, kind of almost makes a pattern of a boot. So some people call these stem-changing boot verbs. So let's take a look at another one of our stem-changing verbs. We have the verb empezar, which remember is also an to stem changing verb. So we need to take the and turn it into an We have a little bit of a problem here, if you can see it. There's two s, so we have to decide which one is going to stem change. So in the case, whenever you have this, where there are two of the s, or whatever letter it is you're changing, the second one is going to be the one to change. So it's this that's going to be our stem changing The first is going to stay like it should be. So we're going to take the here, I left a space for you, and we're going to add in the instead of the plain all the way through, except for the nosotros form. For the nosotros form, the is going to stay in So we have empez, and here we have empez. It's not going to change there. So now we need to work on our endings. Again, it's an AR verb. So we have o, as, a, amos, an. So the conjugations of this verb are yo empiezo, tú empiezas, usted empieza, ella empieza, nosotros empezamos, ustedes empiezan, ellos empiezan. Our next set of verbs that also stem change are almorzar, dormir, poder, and volver. These verbs are also stem changing. So our stem of the verbs is that first part. If you notice, these verbs don't have an in the stem. Instead, the vowel that they all have in common is an o. So these verbs all stem change from o to ue. So the o of the stem is going to change to an ue for everybody but for nosotros. So we'll have an ue, an ue, an ue, an ue, and an ue. But here, in the nosotros form, we're going to keep the o. Alright, let's look at some of these verbs.
Miramos el verbo almorzar. El verbo almorzar significa to eat lunch or to lunch. If you'll notice, whenever we have our stem changing verbs, when you look them up in the dictionary, it'll have your regular verb here in the infinitive form ending in the R, but then afterwards it's going to put this UE, and that just means that the stem is going to change to UE. So you'll need to remember that almorzar changes from O to UE. It's in this category of the O to UE verbs. So I've gone ahead and already filled in all of our conjugations, but we're going to go in and add, instead of the O here, we're going to add UE all the way through. UE, UE, UE. Notice the nosotros form does not get the UE, UE, and UE. And then this is a regular AR verb ending, so we have O, as for tú, a for usted, a for él or ella, amos for nosotros, an for ustedes, and an for ellos. So repita, almuerzo, almuerzas tú, almuerza usted, almuerza ella, almorzamos. Let's try that one again. Almorzamos. Almuerzan ustedes y almuerzan ellas. Our next verb that changes from o to ue is the verb to sleep. We already know a verb that means to sleep. No, not really to sleep. It means to rest. And it also starts with the same letter with the de. See if you remember what that verb is. So let's look at the conjugations. Repita, yo duermo. Tú duermes. Usted duerme. Ella duerme. Nosotros dormimos. Notice the O and also the I. Repita, dormimos. Ustedes duermen. Ellos or ellas duermen. Ooh, I forgot my N there. Duermen. Do you remember the verb that means to rest? It was descansar. We learned it earlier because descansar is a regular verb, whereas the verb dormir needs you to change this little guy here. But dormir means to sleep and descansar means to rest.
Our last set of stem changing verbs that we're going to be looking at are pedir and servir, and as you can probably guess, these verbs change from e, the only vowel in the stem, to e. Alright, so these are stem changing verbs that change from e to e. You're going to have to memorize them. I've already started the verb servir for you, and let's start filling in our stem changes. So instead of the e here, we're going to use an e all the way through, except for the nosotros form. The nosotros form is going to stay with the e. Then we're going to look at the endings. Now this is an IR verb, so be careful for your endings. They're different. So if sirvo yo, tú sirves, usted sirve, él o ella sirve, nosotros servimos. Remember, this I is the only difference between the nosotros form on the ER verbs like corremos and the IR verbs that take an I, not an E or an A. Sirven ustedes and sirven ellos.
The last verb we're going to study today is also an E to E verb, just like servir. It means to ask for, but we're really going to use it to talk about ordering food. But if you want to ask for a car to go somewhere with your parents, you guys probably can't ask for cars yet. But if you want to ask for lunch money, or if you wanted to ask for permission to go out with your friends from your parents, this is a verb you would use, pedir. So, repita, yo pido. Tú pides. Usted pide. Él pide. Nosotros pedimos. Ellos piden. That's down here. And ustedes piden.
Lastly, I want you to write 5 sentences. Here are the subjects and the verbs I'd like you to use for each sentence. I want you to remember that a sentence is not just a conjugated verb, so you're going to need to add some details after it to make sense. Be careful with your stem change or your lack of stem change, and make sure to add extra sentences. I'm going to be looking at these in class.